24 years before Will Smith played Muhammad Ali in Michael Mann's Ali, there was another, now lesser-known biopic about arguably the best boxer of all time. 1977's The Greatest, directed by Tom Grease, is notable not only for tackling Ali's life while he was still an active boxer and world champion, only 3 years after his famous Rumble in the Jungle match against George Foreman, but also for who played the role of Muhammad Ali himself. Yes, it's an ultra-rare example of an individual portraying themselves in their own biopic. Perhaps not surprisingly, given Ali's very specific involvement, the film was criticized for presenting an overly simplified and sanitized version of his life, career, and controversies, and today is more of a rarely seen oddity, even despite the obvious novelty of the lead performance gimmick. But even though Ali might perhaps not have played himself as well as Smith would decades later, it's easy to see why the filmmakers might have thought the experiment would work, given his fame and undeniable charisma. And Ali certainly wouldn't be the last charismatic athlete plucked out of the sports world for potential movie stardom. Throughout the years, the athlete-to-actor pipeline has been a fairly active one in Hollywood. While the play-yourself-in-a-biopic approach of The Greatest might never have caught on, there have still been plenty of examples of athletes playing fictionalized versions of themselves, sometimes for comedic purposes, such as Michael Jordan in Space Jam and LeBron James in Trainwreck and the Space Jam sequel, but also occasionally in more dramatic turns, like Kevin Garnett in Uncut Gems. But other athletes have sought to test out their acting chops even more, pursuing full-on acting careers. In the 70s, football stars Jim Brown and Fred Williamson became legit action stars in the blaxploitation genre, while later in the 90s, Howie Long and Dennis Rodman would seek action stardom, as Shaquille O'Neal dove into the superhero arena with former failure-to-franchise entry Steel. The world of comedy would benefit as well, with basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar giving a memorable turn in Airplane, NFL defensive end Bubba Smith being one of the signature members of the Police Academy franchise, and, although obviously a more complicated, controversial figure today, the recent trailer for the upcoming Naked Gun reboot reminded audiences that once upon a time, O.J. Simpson was a beloved comic presence in that franchise. Occasionally, the screen performance of a professional athlete can legitimately surprise audiences and critics alike, such as in the case of NBA three-point shooter legend Ray Allen's very acclaimed turn in Spike Lee's He Got Game. And this is to say nothing of the abundance of professional wrestlers who have made the leap to the big screen, a transition some might argue is more natural and expected than one might expect from other sports. And, perhaps following Ali's lead, other boxers have taken breaks from the squared circle to give acting a try, such as Tommy Morrison and Antonio Tarver, notably playing the antagonists in the 5th and 6th Rocky films. Today, as MMA has arguably surpassed boxing as the most popular form of professional fighting, it's not surprising that more MMA fighters are recruited into potential action movie stardom, with Randy Couture, Gina Carano, George St. Pierre, Quentin Rampage Jackson, and Conor McGregor just a handful of sports stars who have made the jump to acting. As is the case with the overall world of athletes turned actors, this recent trend of MMA fighters in movies has been a mixed bag, with some performances earning acclaim, often for adding a sense of legitimacy to the film's fight scenes, but others being criticized for distracting from the film due to the performer's lack of polished acting ability. In some cases, the performers in question have had to learn the hard way that being a tough badass in real life doesn't mean it'll be easy to play a tough badass in the movies. And one has to wonder what would be considered a more crushing defeat, losing a professional fight, or losing the lead role in a movie originally developed as a star vehicle just for you. The year is 2018, and STX Entertainment are ready to release a recently rethought and redeveloped film, now starring a bona fide movie star teaming with one of their favorite director collaborators, and in the process hopefully launch the next big action movie franchise with Mile 22.
0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, ready to talk kilometer 35.4.
I love an exchange rate joke. You know me. You know my sweet spot.
That's highbrow. That's highbrow.
Yeah, that is. And that's what we're known for, highbrow humor. That's a hashtag. So we are continuing with our third installment of Mark WahlTURD and the Yucky Bunch, our 4-episode extravaganza looking at the failed franchise starters of Mark Wahlberg. And we will get into, this is kind of exciting because we're starting a new era of Wahlberg today, jumping forward a little bit in time. But before we get into Chris, I'm actually going to throw a little bit of a surprise at you here. I have a correction corner again, a correction corner for my last correction corner.
Oh my God! Correctception. Oh my
yes,
goodness.
Correctception is here. In our last correction corner, we thought we were correcting our previous mistake from the episode before, for our Planet of the Apes episode, where we said that Roddy McDowall was in all the Planet of the Apes movies, and then we corrected ourselves last week to say, well, no, obviously he's not in Battle. There's 2 bad Planet of the Apes movies that start with B, and boy, I got them mixed up, and it's actually beneath Planet of the Apes that, of course, he's not in, not Battle. So my bad again, but I promise.
This listener that's been yelling at you, do they want to be my co-host?
I promise this is the last mistake I will make about the iconic Planet of the Apes franchise starring the late great Malcolm McDowell. So, anyways, so let's move on.
Nice. I thought you were going to talk about what's her name, McDowell? What's her name from Groundhog's Day?
Oh, Andy McDowell.
Margaret
Qualley's mom, Mrs. Qualley. Yeah.
Mrs. Qualley.
Yeah.
Bless her.
Do you think the substance should have been Andy McDowell instead of Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley? Wouldn't that have been like more? Well, whatever.
I mean, crawling all over each other naked like that.
That's true. Well,
maybe an issue.
There are people who would have been into it, and maybe
I think I'm talking to one right now.
We're not here to shame. What we are here to do is talk about another Mark Wahlberg movie. And as I said, we're kind of jumping way ahead here, which is exciting because we get to also talk about what happened in between. But we are moving into like the more modern stage of Mark Wahlberg's career with a pretty recent one. And that is 2018's Mile 22. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
For sure. It is directed by Peter Berg, an F2F alum. We've talked about Hancock and Battleship. Those are 2 fantastic episodes, by the way. So please, if you haven't listened to those, check those ones out. This is written by Leah Carpenter and Graham Rowland. They are story editors for the shows Lost and Fringe, which is awesome. And Graham Rowland, Trev,
I know.
My Matrix theory... In every day, every week of my life, it comes to fruition. But he created the Jack Ryan TV show, and we just did February Ryan, all about Jack Ryan, and we talked in depth about the failed franchise starters in there. But can't escape Jack. We can't escape him.
Your Matrix simulation theory has really been on fire lately. By the time listeners hear this episode, you can check us out on our social media feeds. But our last episode was The Italian Job, which we talked about. It was the boom of like the Mini Cooper kind of. Oh my God, Mini Coopers were everywhere suddenly, right? And then the day after we recorded that, and I had to take pictures and I sent them to you. I was pulling out of the parking lot at my job, and what pulled behind me but a blue Mini Cooper with Union Jack like rear view mirrors. I was like peeking in there. Is that Michael Caine or Mark Wahlberg? It sadly was not, but yeah. So yeah, the Matrix lives. Yes.
A car that we talked about has vanished off the face of the earth for the last decade or so, and was hugely popular, and then all of a sudden, tailing Trev.
Yes.
Mark Wahlberg's agent, I think that was. Okay. What movie is this? Mile 22.
Yep.
The budget of this film is $50 million. Domestically, it made $36 million, and worldwide, it did not do well, and it made $66 million. So this was supposed to be the start of a trilogy, and it did not happen we'll get into it, but some obvious reasons and some others. But this also marks the 4th collaboration between Peter Berg and Mark Wahlberg. We'll talk about those other 3 movies in a bit here, but that's Mile 22. Good night, folks.
Yeah. See you next time. I'm actually really excited to talk about this movie, in particular, like the production stuff of the movie, which we like to start with, because this is one of our favorite kind of like old-fashioned Hollywood gone wild, watch a movie like just completely changing in its conception and what it was meant to be because of like ego and different decisions. And I always love talking about that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, as I said, we've had kind of a big time jump here in the Mark Wahlberg, career, because our last episode was 2003's The Italian Job, which we said at the time was like a comeback for Mark Wahlberg. Wahlberg after a string of failures. He gets like an actual legitimate hit. It's the fact that it didn't get a franchise does not mean The Italian Job wasn't a hit. So that was a comeback, right?
Right.
And now here we are in 2018. So I think it's important to at least just set the stage and talk a little bit about, we're not going to go through chronologically and do movie by movie, but talk about what's Mark Wahlberg's career like in this time between 2003 and 2018. Because I would say it's kind of up and down. It's kind of somewhat a standard like working actor career, some hits, some misses, some maybe in-betweens, but definitely a lot of interesting things to talk about because clearly he's a much bigger, I would say inarguably, he's a much bigger star overall in 2018 than he was in 2003. Would you agree with that?
Time. Oh,
yeah.
For sure. Especially,
maybe we should talk about some of the reasons why, yeah.
Well, especially in 2006, he does The Departed. The Departed. Yeah. And he gets his Oscar nom for that movie. So this is a huge jump in his career, but then he follows it up with like The Happening, which is maybe in my top 5 worst movies of all time. So it's just like in a 2-year period. This is Hollywood, baby. You can be at the Oscars in the running for Best Supporting Actor, and then in a year and a half, you're in some piece of shit movie by M. Night Shyamalan. It's wild because in that year too, he does Max Payne, which is a movie we're gonna talk about in one day. But then he kind of finds like, especially with The Departed, he finds like a comedic voice. I found.
Or almost like he finds his way back to it after like doing it in Boogie Nights and then kind of like forgetting about it for a really long time.
Totally. Because, I think you'd agree, well, I hope you'd agree, that The Other Guys is a really funny movie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's like that movie's great. And that's in like that era of like silly 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street. Like it's just kicking that era off. And The Other Guys is hilarious.
It's not just really silly. It's not just really funny. But we have to say, since he's the man of our hour, he holds his own with Will Ferrell in that movie.
Yes,
he is as legit funny as Will Ferrell in that movie. He's really great. Like with the comedic timing, as you said, we've seen it in like small doses before in movies that kind of straddle the line between comedy and drama, like Boogie Nights or The Departed. The Departed, obviously, way more of a drama, but as you said, his character's funny. Yeah. But yeah, like when he finally puts himself all the way over into comedy, it's like, wow, this guy's kind of got the chops,
Oh, totally.
Which is good because you're right. Because like coming off The Happening, I want to go back to The Happening just for a second because I think.
Do you really? I never ever want to, but yeah.
Well, it's not that I ever want to watch it again, but it is one of those movies that this doesn't happen often, right? This is kind of. This happens with certain actors where you have a movie that's not just a miss, right? But that miss really comes to define your public image for a long time.
Totally.
And like the reputation around you, right? This is really, really kind of destructive to, I think, everyone's overall opinion of Mark Wahlberg as an actor. I mean, this is a movie where so many scenes and so many line deliveries are turned into memes. There's so many gifs of like his face in that movie, the dumb look in his face constantly. That's a tough one for him to come back to, putting aside, like you said, he follows up with Max Payne, which isn't great either. But I just think The Happening is one of those all-timer misses where like, oh, people still to this day probably are like, Mark Wahlberg, that guy from The Happening, he was so horrible in that movie.
He ran away from wind.
Some actors sometimes you just have a typical bad movie, right? And it doesn't follow you. But I think The Happening is one that follows him, which is so I think it's great that he finds the comedy. But that's really like what you were just alluding to is I'd say the overall story of Wahlberg's career from 2003 to 2018. It's just like he never gets long periods of traction where he like kind of enters into like the Brad Pitt or George Clooney echelon to kind of go back to that, like, how he missed out on Ocean's 11. He's never able to get that level. But you can never count him out either, right? We talked about this with Ben Affleck. He's kind of got the same thing where like he makes a lot of missteps and you're like, is this the end of Mark Wahlberg? And then like 2 or 3 movies later, suddenly it's like, oh my God, here's The Fighter, And it's like, again, it's like, he's kind of like, I don't think he was nominated for the Oscar for that, but it's certainly a very, very acclaimed movie that gets some Oscars, Then suddenly he follows out with Contraband. You're like, what? Who? No, nobody cares about this. But then he goes back to like another comedy, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I can't deny Ted is a huge hit, So it's just like he kind of keeps bouncing back and forth here. He's just one of those. He's just one of those never count him out guys, right? Every time you think he might be done, he finds just the right project at just the right time.
Well, and I there was a quote that he said here during the Mile 22 press time, and he was having an interview, and he's self-aware to a point, right? As much as Mark Wahlberg has bravado, he knows that the movie business is, it's a gamble almost every single time. You know, sometimes, like he says here, sometimes movies work, sometimes they don't. I've got a pretty good batting average, better than most, but there are no guarantees. And I think that is kind of defines him. He does have more hits than not. That's why Mark Wahlberg still is a major movie star. And even in this, we kind of skipped over a huge part of his career between 2004 and 2010, and that's Entourage.
Yes.
You know, like he gets in bed with HBO with this huge successful show. I'll tell you right now, I'm not a big Entourage fan.
Okay. I was wondering, but
no, I'm not. Some of my friends have loved it. I tried to get into it back in the day. They lent me the DVDs, you know, the days of DVDs. They were lent out season by season. I tried. It's fine. I just found everybody super unlikable. And I mean, I like movies with unlikable people, but these guys like are too bro-y for me to watch, like, you know what it 60 hours.
When you say you like movies and TV shows with unlikable characters, the key there is almost always that the movie or TV show also knows they're unlikable.
Yes,
right? Like,
totally.
like that's the point of Seinfeld. That's the point of Curb Your Enthusiasm, is that they're like, ha ha ha, our characters are unlikable. Entourage is like, these guys are awesome, and everyone else is like, no, they're unlikable.
Yes,
I kind of throw, if we're talking about Wahlberg's career and like pluses and minuses, I would almost throw Entourage in more of like the neutral territory, because there's no denying it's a huge hit.
Yeah,
it obviously makes him a power player on a kind of producerial level too, you know. But it is the kind of thing where, like you said, I think Entourage had a couple early seasons there where it was just the talk of the town. It seemed like everybody who was watching it loved it. Yeah. And then the longer it went on, and certainly when you got to like by the time of the Entourage movie, it felt like everybody had completely turned on it. Everybody hated it. And it was also like a level of hate now where a lot of that hate seemed like really directed at like Wahlberg, and just like, oh, we know this is based on him and his friends. This is like bro culture to the extreme.
Yes.
I can't believe we ever liked this. So I think by the end of it, it kind of has come back around to almost be like, again, hurting his public perception, where it's like, oh, the Entourage guy. Where at the beginning it was kind of like, oh, the Entourage guy, you know? Yeah.
And it was like the start of inside baseball type Hollywood shows and movies, you know, like I equate it, like off the top of my head, I'm just thinking of it. Remember the Ricky Gervais Extras show?
Yeah, I like that show.
Like that show's awesome, and it felt like similar in that sense that you get a behind the scenes look at how Hollywood works. You get big time cameos like James Cameron, you know, the director of that the Smurfs movie, right? That movie.
Yep.
And it's sequel. I don't know if you saw that. But
remember when it was a joke in the Entourage show that James Cameron made an Aquaman movie and it made $1 billion, and everyone's like, Aquaman made $1 billion. Okay, guys, you know,
yeah, I guess so. Here we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I didn't want to skip over Entourage, and I think it's a seminal part in his career, and like you said, his producerial powers, really.
Yeah.
You know, after or during that show and beyond, Mark Wahlberg has a stake in almost every single one of his films that he's a part of. You know, a lot of them are under his production company. In this time period, Mark Wahlberg becomes Mr. fucking businessman, honestly. And I know we've talked about The Rock a lot, and you know, I'm not going to talk about him a lot here, but he's been so annoying about that.
Yeah.
And it's like he's forgotten that he's an actor too. I don't put Mark Wahlberg in the same area of annoyance.
I think the difference is Mark Wahlberg doesn't strike me as someone who is like, and we'll certainly talk about this in a little bit. Unlike The Rock, he doesn't strike me as someone who needs the world to love him, and he's not like
totally.
In the entire time he has made himself into a product, and he's treated his career more business-like than you know, maybe like, oh, I want to be a great actor, you know? Yeah. So like the same problem we have with The Rock, but he's not as front-facing all the time. He's not putting himself forward. He's not selling other products. Well, later we'll get to that. But it's just in a different way, right? And I said he's not so desperate for like the love of the universe. And I think that's a big difference. You know, he's not on social media being super annoying in the same way The Rock is. So I think even on screen too, like when you combine what The Rock does with the fact that his movies have to all be about how awesome he is, that's not necessarily the case with Wahlberg. Wahlberg is still willing to sometimes play the fool. You know, as we said, in comedies, he's willing to be silly on screen, and in action movies, he's willing to get beat up. You know, so
well, one of my favorite Wahlbergs is when he's a dope. you know, and he's still doing that, you know, like in the Daddy's Home movies, you know, with another Will Ferrell collaboration. I never saw the sequel, but I did think the first one was kind of funny. Sometimes I just like a really stupid movie, and you know that about me. But like Mark Wahlberg is willing to poke fun at himself still to this day. And I also think that he is, how do I say this? I think The Rock is a fake piece of shit. And I don't like making fun of actors, but I do think he is fake as fucking fake can be. While Mark Wahlberg, I think for better or for worse, he is unapologetically himself. Do you know what I mean?
I agree, and which is complicated with Mark Wahlberg because we've talked about how his career goes in different stages, but even Mark Wahlberg, the public persona, has different stages, right? Throughout his career, there are different versions of Mark Wahlberg where, you know, he comes on the scene as like the tough street kid who just lucked his way into acting. Then he becomes more he's trying to be a serious actor. Then, as we said, he becomes like, for a while, like, you know, small doses, he's the comedy guy. And then he's I'm trying to be more of an action star guy. Now we'll talk in the next episode about where he's at now, which I think is also very different. But I think each of those stages are fairly genuine. I think he actually, as a person, kind of finds himself kind of going down these new rabbit holes.
For sure.
We should also just mention, too, in terms of successes, that he finds his way into, I know, one of your favorite franchises, and he finds himself in the later Transformers movies, Transformers Age of Extinction and Transformers The Last Knight, which I know we both agree is the best Transformers film. So.
Don't you dare with your Cogman bullshit. Yes, no, he enters one of my favorite franchises, and I know a lot of people will scoff at that, but, you know, I have my reasons. When Shia left the franchise, I think something is sorely missed, and Mark Wahlberg is not. How do I say this? He's not really a comp to Shia. He's doing a totally different thing.
Yeah.
This is a great segue to the Peter Berg era, honestly, because I've always thought that Peter Berg is kind of like discount Michael Bay or like Paul Greengrass.
We're certainly going to talk about that today, right? And it's weird because I often see, I don't know where this even, I'm not sure, I don't know enough about Peter Berg's we'll talk about Peter Berg in a little bit in his overall filmography. I don't know enough about his career and his background to know where this necessarily comes from, but I've heard people call him a Michael Mann protege. But definitely in terms of directorial style, I definitely think he, especially in the later half of his career, he more wants to be Michael Bay. And we certainly already touched on that when we looked at Battleship in particular.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's interesting, the Michael Mann thing, because we'll get to that during a certain set piece in the film, I think. So that's funny you say that. Yeah. But yes, this is when he gets into the Transformers franchise. I mean, first of all, big money.
Yeah.
Right.
We should say too, like, just quickly too, because I wouldn't want to let this pass. If we're talking about his successes, the reason he finds his way into the Transformers series is he first collaborates with Michael Bay on the amazing, still to I think underrated Pain and Gain.
So good.
Yeah.
The
Michael Bay's tribute to like the Coen brothers, because like Michael Bay is like a huge Coen brothers fan, and Pain and Gain is what it looks like when he tries to make a Coen brothers movie, which is like a funny thing, but I do love that movie.
Yeah. No, same here. It's kind of forgotten about, so go check out Pain and Gain. It's a wild, wild movie, and it's two performances that you are both equally insane between Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. It's a Rock you will never ever get again. I'll say that.
That's Rock used well. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, he gets a huge paycheck with the Transformers franchise. He is interested in this type of big budget action combat, fast talking dialogue, chaotic filmmaking, honestly. And that's Peter Berg. I like Peter Berg enough. Again, I still think he's discount Michael Bay. I'm not trying to say that as even really a negative, honestly. It's just Michael Bay is Michael Bay. For better or for worse. But he does these 3 movies before Mile 22, and just kind of off the bat, I want to rattle off what I feel about them. Lone Survivor, not a huge fan of that one. I don't know if you saw that. Did you?
I didn't. I mean, it's just kind of like, the nationalist propaganda big time, right? Like that's kind of what I like knew about that movie at the time. But
for that one, there was kind of, for a movie called Lone Survivor, it kind of like spoils the movie right away, and then you're like, why do I care? So anyway, so that movie, I will say, Deepwater Horizon, I think is fantastic. I think that's a movie that I was in awe of. It's one of those movies where you sit back and you're like, how the hell did they make this? That's what I loved about it. It's one of those. It's an incredible disaster film. And I think Mark Wahlberg's fantastic in it. And I really, really like Deepwater Horizon. That was a movie after I watched it. I like went around to like multiple people saying, hey, throw this on as loud as possible. Really sit back and enjoy it. And it is a thrill ride. I think Deepwater Horizon.
I've never gotten around to it, but you're not the first person to tell me it actually is worth a watch. So someday I'll make a point to check it out. Yeah.
Patriots Day, about the Boston bombing. I actually found that quite thrilling as well. I know it's more, it hits, I guess, closer to home, and it's, it's a little too soon, maybe one of those types of movies, but I still found it very effective. That's one thing about Peter Berg. He is an effective filmmaker, and pacing wise, I think his movies really cook. So that movie's quite good.
That's the only one of these I've seen, these first three, and I wasn't as high on it as you were. And I think that's just primarily because I'd also seen like a documentary about the Boston bombing and like the manhunt. And it was kind of one of those things where, and I think this goes to what you're saying about it being so soon, was that especially compared to like, wow, I just watched this documentary, and sometimes the dramatized version can't be as thrilling as the real thing, So it just felt like, oh, I'm watching this like kind of cosplay version of it. So that just, and it's not even that I thought it was terrible. I just kind of like, I was more involved by watching the actual documentary than watching the movie. But we should also mention like the through line of all three of those, Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, and Patriots Day, all true stories. You know? So that's kind of something to keep in mind when they segue into Mile 22, which is kind of a departure for them.
Yeah. Okay. We got to talk about something a little bit more
not great to talk about.
But we have
to. We've alluded to it in previous episodes. We said that we were holding off on it because, as we just said, this is the episode where we're kind of covering the period of like 2003 to 2018. And I think it's safe to say that in that span of time, and I don't know if I can point to the exact moment because I think it's probably like a little different for everyone, but I think over those years is when more people become aware, thanks to like the internet and a more, kind of just overall pressing of everyone online to like want to cancel people and bring things up from the past and find, more people become aware of Mark Wahlberg's kind of controversial past, in particular, some pretty terrible things he did as a youth. Well, let's just say it. We don't have to say it's not alleged. He was, convicted and went to jail for some hate crimes. So.
Yeah, I'll rattle these off and we can kind of talk about it as they go. But in 1986, Wahlberg was 15 years. Him and some friends chased some 3 black children around and pelted rocks at them, yelling the N-word at them until somebody had to intervene. Around the same exact, I think, week, they chased a bunch of black children on the beach, throwing rocks at them again, yelling N-words and expletives. And then in 1988, only 2 years later, so Wahlberg's 17 or 18 at this point, he attacked 2 Vietnamese men while high on PCP. Now, Trev, before I'm going to ask you. Well, I'll tell you about me. I have been in my occasional scraps, growing up and even into my adult life. I don't know if being high makes you racist, but...
Yeah, because when he attacked them, he was also, again, throwing out some pretty horrible anti-Asian slurs. Yes.
And anyways, these attacks, he was found guilty of violating the civil rights of his victims. The one with the Vietnamese man, he was charged with attempted murder. He pleaded guilty to felony assault, claiming that he was intoxicated. Like I said, I've never been so intoxicated to be racist. However, he was sentenced to 2 years, only served 45 days. And in 2014, so again, this is why we're talking about it here, in the middle of this up and down resurgence, this up and down, just like Mark Wahlberg is becoming a major Hollywood player. He attempted to seek a pardon for the Vietnamese man assault. He later
which
dropped...
in the court of public opinion was not the best move because I think that was really the moment that it really got brought to the forefront in the media, and then like everybody was like mad at him because the people who didn't know about it suddenly learned about it and were like, "Why? What do you mean a pardon? Like, what, you served your time, just you should accept it." So I think people were like really kind of disgusted by that.
Yeah. I'll just say some quotes from him though, like I am deeply sorry for the actions that I took on the night of April 8th, 1988, as well as for any lasting damage that I may have caused the victims. Since that time, I have dedicated myself to becoming a better person and citizen so that I can be a role model to my children and others. He later dropped his pardon request 2 years later, just kind of basically saying, hey, you know what? I done the work to make things right. There's no more I can do. And I will say, and you alluded to this last episode, that the man who was hit with what did he was hit with like a 2x4, right? It's like a wooden stick. He actually did forgive Mark Wahlberg. He said here, he was young and reckless, but I forgive him now. Everyone deserves another chance. I would like to see him get a pardon. He should not have the crime hanging over him any longer. So props to that guy.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's one of those things I feel like it's worth talking about Wahlberg's career. It is complicated, but I mean, as someone who does believe in like restorative justice, and the fact that people can become better and can learn their lessons, we just kind of have to. It's up to everyone to decide how they feel about Mark Wahlberg. But at a certain point, you do have to maybe just allow yourself to believe that people can change. And maybe Wahlberg legitimately has changed and feels bad about it. And honestly, if the guy he attacked forgave him, who am I to like dismiss that forgiveness?
Totally.
It's kind of just that thing where it's not that it didn't happen. It's not that it's not worth acknowledging. It's something Mark Wahlberg will always have to live with and remember. But I don't know how people. I don't even know if people will take me saying this, but at this point, because of that person's forgiveness and because of Wahlberg's own statements about how he feels about it now, it's not really stopping me from watching any Wahlberg movies. Same.
We literally named theme month for him. So
that's.
I'm right there with you. I mean, cancellations happen, and people can really go full on with the cavalry to cancel them forever, but like you said, the victim forgives him. I wasn't I didn't see any of this. It did happen, but people do grow, right?
Kids can be really stupid, especially being raised in certain environments or certain and like being surrounded by the wrong people. And let's be honest, probably finding his way into acting and probably finding himself in an industry suddenly with a lot more diversity. And you'd like to believe that maybe his eyes were opened a little bit, right? Yeah. And he started to realize like what an asshole he was in his youth and became a little bit more accepting of everyone around him. So I will choose to look on the positive and believe that.
Same. What Trev's saying is that he forgives Wahlberg for his hate crime. And everybody should
you said you agree. So like,
I just want a soundbite. Okay, just in case.
You know what I'll say? I forgive him for his hate crime more than I forgive him for Entourage.
You know what? That's a Nobel Peace Prize right there. That's what that is. Yeah, for sure.
Because Entourage, especially Entourage the movie, that's the hate crime.
Yeah. We don't have to. Did that get a sequel? We don't have to do that one, right?
I don't know that they were ever intending to, so I'm not like it's not on our list. So
okay, good.
Year 24 of the podcast, maybe we'll be hit up to do it, but.
When we're just beaming the podcast into each other's brains because we are the only listeners. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a little summary of Mark Wahlberg's, past, I guess. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about Mile 22 and the production, how this got completely rejigged.
Yeah, because now that we've talked about Mark Wahlberg and Mark Wahlberg nonstop for the past 20 minutes or whatever, let us just first point out that Mile 22 was not meant to be a Mark Wahlberg movie.
It was not. It was meant to, in 2015, it was announced that Ronda Rousey, this was going to be her action starring vehicle. Yes. Now, what happened in 2015 after they announced that was a little movie called Furious 7 came out. Mm-hmm. And even as a hardcore Fast fan as I am, I watched that movie and I said, Ronda Rousey, she's not the guy. No. She is... we don't like making fun of actors, and some may not call her an actor.
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't like making fun of actors.
Yes,
UFC fighters, hey, I'll that's fine.
Fair game. Because she was horrible. So producers panic at this point. They have a script, they have everything ready to go, but they are panicking because they need a new lead. They're still going to have Rhonda in the movie, but they are going to make her a supporting character. But they need a James Silva, who they've now rewritten for the main cast, and they're looking at Will Smith, which is crazy. Will Smith, of course, says no. And Mark Wahlberg comes around to the script. Again, he likes Peter Berg. He signs on only if he is the main character. So that is the reason why Mark Wahlberg is in this movie as the main character, planned for a franchise starter for a trilogy. And Ronda Rousey is, I think has 3 lines in the whole movie.
And not only the main character, but we should also say that, and don't worry, this isn't a spoiler because they changed it, and we'll get into like what the actual spoilers are in our review. But in that version, the original version of the script he read, that was supposed to be the Ronda Rousey star vehicle, the Silva character was not only a side character, but he was also revealed to be a traitor in the 3rd act and killed. Yeah. And Wahlberg said, well, I like the idea of this character, but I need to be in every scene. I need to not be a traitor, and I definitely need to not die. I need to be the star of the sequels moving forward. Mm-hmm. So the movie undergoes gigantic changes, and it is like one of those fascinating things where, we've done a couple other movies like this. It's just always amazing to me that a movie starts as one thing, and just because of Hollywood tomfoolery, and just like the getting putting their horses ahead of the cart anyways with the Ronda Rousey thing. For those who don't know, we should say, we alluded to, but Ronda Rousey is a UFC fighter. She was kind of like the face of the female fighting world for a while, until she got beat and revealed herself as the biggest crybaby sore loser ever. I understand. Ronda Rousey could definitely beat my ass too, but I lost. I was never a huge Ronda Rousey fan. I always felt like the UFC was like feeding her easy fights. Yes. And the second she had like real opponents, she started to like show her limitations, and it was just more about, it's fine if you lose, but her responses to losing was always like the worst, and I kind of just like lost all respect for her.
It was the Ellen interview. That's what it was. Yeah,
and at the same time, she was, Hollywood was also like, let's try and make her a star, and that didn't work either. It was kind of like this double whammy of just getting sick of her. But yeah, just like them going like, "Ooh, okay, can't be the Ronda Rousey movie." Like we even saw that happen again, right? Because she was supposed to be the star of the.
I was just about to say this.
The Roadhouse remake. Yeah.
Yes. And then we got Conor McGregor in there instead.
Yeah. Well, I think like even like she was supposed to be like the Jake Gyllenhaal part, right? So it's just like, forget about this, So
yeah, we see a lot of these fighters turned actors. Randy Couture is part of that. Rampage Jackson, we covered in the A-Team. This happens quite a bit. It doesn't usually work out. I don't know. Like it's funny because, how do I say this? UFC fighters are like real fighters, okay? And this is no disrespect to my WWE, the fans out there. Yeah. But WWE wrestlers seem to transition way easier to Hollywood because they are performing. Right. And real fighters, they're just fighters. And it is painfully obvious.
They're also, speaking of pain, they're also getting punched in the head for real more.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Maybe it's not surprising that they're not the strongest actors.
Yeah.
I didn't, when we did A-Team, not a movie I love, but I thought, Rampage Jackson was actually kind of had some charisma in it. He might be like, maybe he's the best of like the UFC fighters. I know some people will defer to Gina Carano. I would definitely disagree with that. Remind you that when she did the movie Haywire, they had to like dub her whole performance with another actor. Oh, yeah. And I never even thought, and I never really even thought she was that amazing on The Mandalorian. So I was certainly not heartbroken when her character was written out. But I don't feel sad that the Ronda Rousey version of Mile 22 didn't happen.
No, definitely not. That's all I got. They made the movie.
Yeah, well, I guess we should talk about it.
Yeah.
Do you want to live in a world where everybody feels cozy and validated all the time? Or do you want to live in a world that works? We fight new wars. The old options, military, diplomacy, they don't always succeed. Sometimes you need a third option. That's Overwatch. According to the government, we do not exist. The ghosts. But we are very real, and we get shit done.
only going to outline this one time. 9 pounds of radioactive isotope is missing.
It's enough to make 6 major cities uninhabitable.
He knows exactly where it is.
Stop where you are, sir. On your knees. Get out.
What do you want?
I want out of the country.
He's wanted for espionage.
We're talking about a corrupt, low-level cop.
You're sitting here indicates he's not so low level.
Be careful.
You fucking be careful.
Do you have men wandering our embassy?
You're good there. Can I trust you?
Put me on a plane to the U.S. and I'll give you everything.
Mind state of a gangster from the 40s.
To go. This is an Overwatch operation.
The goal is deliver that package to here, mile 22.
Look, you know the game this is.
Take a drive.
Pray guides me by what I'm about to go through.
They got bikes, Dougie.
Pray. I'm trying to beat life cause I can't cheat death.
Brother Salvo, we're in contact. Major contact.
Requesting hand of God.
Got it. Take it.
Pray.
How many miles out are we?
12.
Our angel can only stay on the ground 10 minutes. They miss that window, they are dead.
Pray.
You keep coming to me until you kill us all. Is that the game today? I'll play.
Everything I've seen made me everything I am. Pray. Fast forward, freeze frame on my pistol. Pray.
You're chaos. I think I might be worse.
I am a killer who looks like a hero.
Pray.
You feeling calm, Alice?
Not even a little. Are you?
I'm totally calm.
That's because you're mentally unstable.
Thank you.
An elite paramilitary team called Overwatch is tasked with escorting a rogue Indonesian police officer with vital information regarding a devastating terrorist attack across 22 miles from the American embassy to an airfield. With the help of communications supervisor Bishop, second-in-command Alice, and other members, team leader Jimmy Silva must outrun significant forces in order to complete their mission.
Mile 22. This was that's a good synopsis for what was amazingly for us a very short movie. I know you and I were both thrilled. This movie was only 90 minutes. This is one where I don't think either of us really knows if we have any history with it or knows how we felt about it. So if you don't mind, I'll go first on this one.
Sure.
Mile 22. So there's a moment in this movie, and I don't want to spoil what this moment alludes to yet, because it's something that will come up later when we get into like third act revelations. But there's a moment in this movie where they say that a character has performed a Trojan horse scenario on the other characters. And I kind of feel like this movie is a Trojan horse movie in that it has this like sheen, right, of like things that you would like, right? It's like, oh, it's only 90 minutes. It has a few very exciting action scenes, and it is trying to elevate a particular international action star that I know both you and I love and want to see be a Hollywood star. Mm-hmm. So like you can walk away from it kind of thinking like, I think maybe that was like kind of fun. You know, I didn't hate that. And then the more you kind of think about it and the more you sit with it for a while, and even sometimes while watching it, there are some systematic problems to this movie in terms of like structure and script that I think the Trojan horse is, those good things I was talking about, are hiding what is actually a kind of a shitty movie. So here's what I wanted to bring to you, because I was thinking about like what this movie is, right? And when we did The Italian Job, we kept talking about its place in the overall pantheon of heist movies and how much we love heist movies. And what I'll say about Mile 22 is Mile 22 fits into another kind of subgenre that I never really see people talk about, but I love. And in fact, I even looked up online to see if anyone else had really like kind of examined this as a subgenre or defined it, and I didn't see it as much as I wanted to. So I'm going to call these movies gauntlet movies or running the gauntlet movies. These are movies where characters have to make it from point A to point B under the threat of time and or external forces, right? So there's some kind of deadline, and beyond the deadline, there might also be people trying to stop them from getting to point A to point B. And I'm just going to rattle off some quick examples. Obviously, I'm taking the name Gauntlet from The Gauntlet, the classic Clint Eastwood movie where he's a cop who has to take an escort played by Sandra Locke to testify against the mafia. So, of course, the mafia is trying to stop them the whole way. Probably my favorite Gauntlet movie, one of my just favorite like action movies ever, Walter Hill's The Warriors. I would throw Mad Max Fury Road into the Gauntlet pantheon. 16 Blocks, the Richard Donner movie with Bruce Willis and F2F previous episode alum Mos Def, where he's a detective trying to get Mos Def to a court with crooked cops trying to stop him. I would even throw the Poseidon Adventure into this, with the late great Gene Hackman. No necessary bad guys trying to stop them there, but that's another one where they have to make it from the top of the ship up to the bottom of the ship because it's upside down, right? By a certain time, right? So it's still a Gauntlet movie. And then you can even think of like single location Gauntlet movies, such as one of our favorites, one of our all-time best F2F movies, Dread, and of course The Raid, which very relevant here. Now, there are two key elements, I think, to Gauntlet movies for them to be successful. Number one is that a Gauntlet movie should reveal character through action during the Gauntlet. Like during the Gauntlet, you're learning more about your characters through what they do and what they say. And then the second key element is that during the Gauntlet, you want to see there be a connection forged between the protector and the protectee. Like, so whoever is protecting someone, you want to see them form some kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think the ultimate failing of Mile 22 is that it misses the mark on both of those elements. Yeah. We don't learn anything new about our characters throughout the course of the Gauntlet. In fact, everything we learn about Mark Wahlberg's character is given to us in this really kind of hokey opening credits exposition dump that honestly felt more like it belonged in a 90s Seagal movie. Mm-hmm. And there's no connection formed between the team, and in particular Mark Wahlberg, and the Indonesian cop character that they're transporting, which, again, we'll talk more about this when we get into the spoilers in the third act, but I think the fact that they never become more friendly and that we don't see more relationship form really undercuts some reveals at the end of the movie and where they were trying to go with sequels. Mm-hmm. So that's what really kind of took me, it kept me at a distance from this. I did enjoy some of the action scenes. I liked that it was short. I really did not like Mark Wahlberg's character in this, and that's something I know we can talk about. But ultimately, I think my main problems were that I just felt like it was, maybe because it was so short, maybe it was because it was so single-minded and such a Michael Bay wannabe. I know we'll talk about that too. I felt like this is on the really, really low end of the spectrum of the Gauntlet movies. I didn't hate watching it. It's just short enough, and like I said, it has some action scenes that are kind of fun. But ultimately, I thought it missed the mark for me.
We are almost deadlocked in this because I'm so glad you said the Trojan horse thing, and then you made the comparison and that's how you felt about it, because that's how I felt too. I'm watching the movie because it's funny. Okay, I have notes while I watch, right? Yeah, and then I usually make notes after, right? And after I've thought about it for a little longer, yada yada. And my notes while I was watching were actually quite positive. Mm-hmm. Oh man, this is fun. This is the action is actually pretty great, other than we'll talk about the editing choices soon. But there's two action scenes in particular that is choreographed by the great Iko Uwais, who is the Indonesian main character there, star of The Raid and The Raid 2. So it is pretty breathtaking to watch those sequences. And I said earlier that Peter Berg's style is very propulsive and his pacing is very good. And I think this is even an 85-minute movie. You know what I mean?
When you're taking credits, yeah.
Oh, dude, it's quick and it gets to the point and it's pretty relentless. And I do you're calling the Gauntlet movies. Obviously, I'll add in you're just man on a mission movie, right? It's an escort mission. It's almost in real time, a lot of it. So there's a lot of good to be had here. But you really nailed it with those two missing factors. Because when I watch a man on a mission movie, or we talked about this during the Mutant Chronicles, I need to care about these guys, and the credits roll of this movie, and you're like, I don't give a fuck. About who these people were, who they are, who's in danger still, why we're gonna come later to maybe save somebody, but there's nothing learned about these characters during the film, just like you said. And Mark Wahlberg, his character, and I'm going to say this, and I mean this in the best way, okay? So don't take people listening, do not take this the wrong way. Take it the way that Hollywood interacts with this idea, okay? He's a on the spectrum superhero, okay? He's an autistic asshole. Yeah. And that's Hollywood in a nutshell when they play with characters that might be on the spectrum. They make them into these really fast talking assholes a lot of the time. And it's very short-sighted. I think we both know and are close with people that are on the spectrum. So it's just kind of a misinterpretation and maybe a miscalculation for the broader populace to get, quote unquote. And this is back in 2018. So honestly, a lot has changed in 7 years. However, James Silva is just a fast talking dickhead.
Yeah.
And he keeps snapping his elastic band because that's like his autistic trait, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's annoying. Yeah. And every time it zooms in and the sound effect is really big, it's just like, it always reminds you that he's on the edge. And I just felt this, if he's going to be my leader, he's just too wild. You know, he's too all over the place and he's too mean. You know, during the movie, his team members are either freaking out and like Alice, played by Lauren Cohan, the beautiful Lauren Cohan. I like her. She brings her Walking Dead action skills to this film, and she has a backstory that she's going through a really shitty divorce and separation and stuff with her kid, and she's obviously like losing it at times. And I really wanted what Mark Wahlberg did in The Italian Job with Charlize Theron, is to like sit her down and be her friend. And instead, he just kind of yells at them. And then like, there's a moment where Lauren Cohan like might be killed, and then they save her in the middle of the movie. And then he says to her, "You just wasted 10 minutes off of our time." And I'm like, that was mean. She almost got killed. So to kind of wrap up my initial thoughts, I think there is actually a lot here to like.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it for an hour afterwards, you realize that it is just kind of a bad DTV film.
It ends on such a cliffhanger, right? And as the credits roll, I don't know if you did too, you find yourself sitting there wondering, why don't I feel more jacked right now? Like, totally. Why don't I want to roll into the next one? Because I was enjoying some of the action, so why do I feel empty at the end of it? And that's what it is. It's because the movie, the soul is empty in this movie. And like even that moment you were alluding to where they go back to save Lauren Cohan, I don't know if I even believed in that moment that he would, because we've seen him, he's already lost everybody else on the team, right? All his other team members have been killed on this mission, and we've seen very directly that he does not give it a second thought, right? If they're injured, he actually kind of pushes them to say, stay behind and sacrifice yourself as we move on. Yep. And there's nothing established earlier in the movie to make us believe he has any kind of particular special relationship with Lauren Cohan where this is the one he'd go back to save. So when he makes that decision, it just feels out of place. And I get it, like it's obviously a movie thing, but in a better movie, you would either establish that or something would happen during the mission to where he's like, no, I have to save her. You know, she's the one I have to save because she's the only one who has a family, or I really want to make sure she gets to her kid's birthday party or something. But the movie doesn't even really do that. Anytime they talk about their personal lives, he basically tells them to shut the fuck up and says their personal lives don't matter. And even what you mentioned about him being on the spectrum, and we talked, and I talked about how everything we learned about him is just in that like the exposition montage about his backstory in the credits. I guess we're supposed to believe he's like super, super intelligent, but that's never shown in the movie either.
Never.
Like really his only like special trait is like he's the biggest asshole in the world. And I kept wondering, are we finally going to see like what makes him special beyond just being such a dick? And that never happens. So we've talked a lot in these episodes about what Mark Wahlberg is really good at. And I think both you and I agree. You mentioned The Italian Job and his relationship with Charlize Theron. We've already said he really excels when he can play kind of either dopey or really actually kind of loving, right? Mm-hmm. Mark Wahlberg's not charismatic enough to play a lovable asshole. Unless it's supposed to be kind of funny, right? Like you could say, obviously his Departed character, I'd say is a little bit of a lovable asshole, but that's almost more just through the circumstances of that movie and like how little he's in it, you know? But like when he's front and center, I don't know, maybe you do bring kind of some of your like real life perception of Wahlberg to this and you know, and then they're asking us to just think he's cool because he's an asshole. Honestly, I didn't read your like the research notes until after I watched the movie, and Will Smith would be better in this. Because Will Smith Will Smith has more natural charisma. And I just feel like he would have been more like, you know, I don't love the like Suicide Squad, but he's one of the best things of it, right? And I think like I would see him being the same kind of thing in this, where yes, he's an asshole, but it's Will Smith. He just has this kind of natural lovability to him, and that's what Wahlberg is missing here.
Well, there's something about a fast-talking, cliched Boston tough guy that just doesn't make me want to follow this guy into battle. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and that's no disrespect to the Boston people out there, you know, like Mark Wahlberg is just too arrogant and too dickish. even just the way that like he's talking so fast in that like mile a minute berating of any co-star that's talking to him. He's almost like screaming at them at every point. And yeah, like this guy again is just not the guy. I need to look up to my team leader. I need to look up to the guy that when, spoilers, Ronda Rousey doesn't make it through. And I need to, well, first of all, she's maybe a bad example because she can't emote worth shit. But the way that she sacrifices herself and James Silva's like, this is what you got to do. The scene just doesn't have any impact whatsoever. And like I was looking at some of the critiques afterwards. Todd McCarthy of The Hollywood Reporter, he wrote this: like an athlete who leaves it all on the field, the film leaves it all in the moment and on the screen, and there's really nothing to take away afterwards. There is nothing to think about, no nuances to contemplate, no connection with these characters who exist only in a moment of hypertension and crisis, no greater truths to consider other than to prevail.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's how I feel about the movie. Is the moments are working, but the nuance is gone. That you sit with those moments, those great action scenes, and Iko Uwei's amazing fucking choreography, this incredible Michael Mann-esque heat traffic shootout. It's awesome, but you feel nothing watching it. It's cool to look at, believe me. And it's technically amazing. Other than the editing is something out of, some mid-2000s bullshit chop.
You know what the editing is you and I are both Michael Bay defenders, and this movie, the editing is what people accuse Michael Bay of, but it's not true.
You're so right.
That hyper Michael Bay editing works really well when Michael Bay does it, and then we've seen so many other people try to do it and be like, okay, so you just keep cutting, quick cuts, cut over this thing that makes no sense. During the action scene, let's show surveillance camera footage of the action scene for no reason, which is like, no, you're pulling us away from the actual action. It's like Bay is so good at like the right moments to cut, what to focus on, how much time to spend on something to where, yes, it's very chaotic and exciting, but this is chaotic and messy and like, and kind of like really hard to get a grasp of at times. It's at its best, like what you said, when you can tell Echo had more of like a hand in it and it just kind of slows down to show him fight. Those are always like the best moments in the movie.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I love a ticking clock. You talked about that already, that, a ticking clock plot device is my bread and butter. Mm-hmm. So the idea in this film is Iko Uwais is his character, Lee Noor. He basically goes to the U.S. Embassy, and he's defecting from the Indonesian police military, whatever. And he's like, I need to get out of this country. Take me to the U.S., give me sanctuary, and I'll give you this code and this data disk that's decrypting that is going to show you that there's like 15 terrorist plots that are going on right now that you can evade. But what he does is he encrypts the data disk with it's like a self-destructive timeline, right? Mm-hmm. So they have like a day to get him to this airstrip, and if they don't get him to the airstrip in time, that information is gone, and then, c'est la vie to the terrorist attacks. So it's a great device. You're so right that I wish James Silva and team would befriend him more as the movie goes by, because he is helping out as well.
Yeah.
And he seems so innocent that it should work, and especially because it's revealed that Alice Kerr, Lauren Cohen's character, was using him as an informant.
Yeah, she knows him already.
So, like, why they don't have any really sweet moments together, I'm not sure. Probably just to keep this under 85 minutes and just keep the plot going. But what it loses, or what it gains in pacing, it just loses in character. So, again, it's kind of just a nothing movie at that point.
It's like you want to give the movie credit, but then you have to immediately take it away at the same time, right? Because it's one of the first Hollywood movies to realize what we might have in what Hollywood might have in Iko Uwais. So of course, as we said, he starred in the Raid movies, and I think any action head would watch those movies and go, oh my God, this is the next guy, right?
Yeah.
This is our next big martial arts star. Please, please, please start using him. And you got to give it to Mile 22 to be one of the first American movies to say, all right, let's give him. He's third build here. He's the third lead.
Hey! The Force Awakens tried. Remember that?
This is in a bigger way. Obviously.
I know. I'm kidding. They wasted him too. So,
but it is strange because they were smart enough to know there's something there, but then it's like they don't have the confidence to then within the movie fully exploit it. And as you said, realize like, wow, this would become more interesting if he became more and more part of the team, and even if it became a kind of more like a buddy two-hander between him and Wahlberg. That's kind of what we want to see, right? We want to see these two actors that we like, who are being pushed forward as the leads here. We want to see them form a friendship and start working together and start to like each other. And again, we'll get into the later reveals, but that would also really, really help your later reveals and give it more of a sense of drama if you were actually playing out and letting Iko be anything more than just kind of this action cipher.
Yeah.
I love the action scenes, but he is just a cipher, which is too bad where the movie ends up heading.
I love that you said that Hollywood doesn't know what they have either, because him and his team choreograph all the fights, right? And a lot of the action scenes, and they are breathtaking. If they didn't cut the shit out of them, right?
Yep. Well, this is the Hollywood thing, right?
Yeah, like there's what you're getting, or what I'm getting at is they have faith in the guy to choreograph the scenes, but then they don't have the faith in the post-production team to make it look good. When really you should just set the camera up and let these guys do what they do best. And again, I still like the action scenes. I still think they're pretty fantastic. But there was a piece of me just being like, oh, here we go again. Hyperactive editing for no reason.
Yeah.
Not as bad as like the Taken movies, but bad enough.
20, like the Taken, like 20 cuts on one single jump over the fence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a constant problem in Hollywood where they bring over these martial arts stars from other countries, and they don't have the faith to let them fully direct the scenes or guide the direction of them. So it's always like, oh, we saw these international martial arts movies and loved them, but we don't know how to do that, and we're so cocky we want to make them conform to our style. It's a reason why, and I enjoy some of Jackie Chan's American movies, but it's a reason why none of them are as exciting as his Hong Kong movies. And he's talked about how frustrating that is to him, where they don't let him do the action scenes he wants in the way he wants to. You really kind of wish that whenever you just would cut to an Echo Uwais fight scene in this, they just actually let Gareth Evans come in and direct it, right? Or just let Uwais direct it, because Berg's not the guy for that, as you say. But that's the thing too, is like there's still the most exciting part of the movie, because there's just something so naturally exciting about watching Echo fight that it kind of breaks through the bad editing a little bit, but it's still frustrating.
It's because it's unique. The Indonesian fight style and what he brings
Silat.
to it's different, and it's brutal, and it's like full body, like it's there's like even this great moment in the highway chase or the highway shootout, where he breaks the windshield,
so
and
good,
gets and he grabs the guy's head and he puts his like neck, his throat, and shakes him back and forth on the broken glass, and I'm like, oh man, brutal. I screamed. I was like, ah! Like it's so effective. What he brings to the table. And like, guys, if you haven't, I hope a lot of the listeners have seen the Raid 1 and 2, but the Raid 2, especially when it comes to like the blade fight, in the kitchen, this scene does a similar thing in the CIA embassy, I guess the US embassy, in like kind of a hospital-y looking area, and it's very reminiscent, and it's fucking awesome. Like, it's just so good. It's so. I
would also throw in, if you're like, okay, I haven't seen the Raid or the Raid 2, I'll go check them out. Also throw in The Night Comes for Us, which I've always said to me is like the spiritual Raid 3, and Echo Uwais is actually the bad guy in that, which shows he's willing to do both hero and villain roles, which might be important later. But yeah, and but that one is also, that one in particular is like known for how brutal the fights are, which is those are fight scenes as gory as like a horror movie slasher sequence.
Oh yeah. He really is the star of this movie. That's why I guess before we talk about the reveals and stuff, did this deserve sequels? Mark Wahlberg is I just don't like his character. I just don't want to really follow his character. Who I do want to follow though is Lee Noor. I want to see what he's up to, what he's doing. I I think he's a really strong performer up against even Mark Wahlberg. You know what I mean? I think he's good. Like, he has some depth, and not only is he great in the action, but I believe him. I felt like I believed him while watching the movie.
I also liked in this movie, and again, you alluded to this earlier about how she's really the only character that is allowed to have even the slightest bit of a backstory that we can care about. But maybe it's also just because I already am, predisposed to liking Lauren Cohen, who I was always a fan of on The Walking Dead. This would have been right about the time that she was first leaving The Walking Dead after like a pay dispute and feeling like she was probably going to have a chance to be a bigger star. And I know she went on after this, like, I think it's the very next year she does that show, like Whiskey Cavalier, that gets canceled right away. And suddenly she's like, I was just kidding. I'm going back to The Walking Dead, where she is still to this day on her Walking Dead spinoff. And I think that really is too bad, because I watch a movie like this and she is not given a lot in terms of like story, but she is given the most like kind of emotional through line of anybody.
Yeah.
And she kicks ass in the action scenes. She holds her own with both Wahlberg and Uwais on like an intensity level. So yeah, I thought she ruled in this, even though ultimately the movie wasn't as interested in her as the two men, of course. But I still really liked her. I did think it was very telling, because there's been a lot of criticism, as you know, thrown at Wahlberg and Peter Berg in their movies as being kind of these like macho fests,
Right.
And there's definitely a scene where she has her big standout like fight scene against a man, and she's getting her ass kicked, but she's also kind of fighting back and giving her own. But ultimately, she cannot win the fight. She has to be saved by the two men. And to that same degree, I also noticed that we keep cutting back to like this woman hacker, this computer hacker, who is trying to break the code before Echo Uwais gives them the passcode. And she's like, I'm going to make this thing my bitch. I'm going to break it. And of course, she's never allowed to. It's just like, so they're like, yeah, that woman, she can't really, she doesn't know computers.
Hey, I will say that fight scene with her character and that big motherfucker, like, she's getting thrown and tossed around the room, but she still keeps getting up. So she may not have survived it. And
no, it is a good fight. Yeah.
But she still keeps getting up, and it's pretty sweet. And she's...
Well, now...
No, I was just going to say that she's a performer that is obviously beautiful, but she is like, I believe her. Like, I believe that she can hold her own. I believe she's a tough son of a bitch,
And as awful as this might sound, I hope people will understand where I'm coming from with this. I know you and I often talk about how like movies don't let women get beat up. It's like a frustration in action movies, and it's like, well, but
and then if they do, they get in trouble.
Yeah, and like we grew up on action movies where like the action stars, no matter their gender, did get beat up, and that's always more exciting because you want to see your heroes overcome obstacles. And so when you have fight scenes where they can't muss their makeup up, or they don't want them to get hit too bad, or they don't want them to bleed, that's not as exciting. So it's kind of awesome that she has this fight scene where she's getting thrown around and as you said, keeps getting up and keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I thought she was a highlight in the movie too. Speaking of F2F alums, can we talk for a moment about John Malkovich?
I already mentioned the movie Mutant Chronicles, and this is another film where he basically is in one room for one day, maybe.
Yeah. I'd say a little bit more committed, right? He's not as bad in this. Sure. We're getting a little bit more of like the Malkovich magic, where he can just deliver lines so weird that it's kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he has a couple moments that point to another big problem I have with the movie, and this is
Wigs?
Especially... No, but it is a bad wig. No, I wonder if you also clocked this, because I'm guessing it's something that bothers you too. It's that pseudo philosophizing bullshit of these like these macho bro movies that want to seem smarter than they are. So this is definitely true of Silva as well, right? Throughout the whole movie, Silva is giving these like pseudo philosophical monologues, to the point where at a certain point Malkovich even yells at him like, stop monologuing, you bipolar fuck. And really you could just use that as like a review for the whole movie, because there's like a really bad stylistic decision too, of where throughout the movie we're cutting to Mark Wahlberg giving a debrief on the whole event afterwards. First of all, I hate that, because like we basically know he lives, it's just kind of undercutting everything. But also, oh God, all those bits of dialogue are terrible with him, because he's just doing that. He's doing like all this, instead of just explaining what happened, he's doing it. It's like these like philosophical discussions and all these bad metaphors and analogies. But the worst one is there's a moment where one of the team members gets hurt really bad. And so, as we said, Mark Wahlberg kind of tells him like, hey, you stay behind and take out these guys. You're going to die anyways. Make a last stand. And the team member agrees, and he kind of gets all his ammo ready, and he stays behind to, shoot the bad guys as he gets surrounded, but he's getting shot as well. It's his last stand. And that would be an okay, if kind of generic action moment, Except as it's happening, we also are intercutting with John Malkovich saying, and I wrote this down, I wanted to get this quote right. This is what John Malkovich says to no one as this is happening. He's just talking to himself. He's musing about what's happening. He says, "Every normal man must be tempted at times to spit upon his hands, hoist the black flag, and begin slitting throats." What? Like, it's just why does it? I hate when we do stuff like that, because first of all, what are you talking about? This is not a normal man. This is a guy who's a part of a special ops team that's done this 100 times.
Yeah. So
like, what is your metaphor or analogy even about here? But also, like, why would you say this in this moment? I'm pretty sure what you would actually say is, "Oh, this sucks. I'm losing a man." It's just, the movie just does it so much, and it made me roll my eyes every time.
It's just overwritten, right? Like, that's what it is. It's overwriting a bunch of cliches instead of just sticking with the cliche movie it is. You know,
the only other, before we get into the reveals, the only other like thing like that I wanted to point out, which again I think points to where you kind of like, you might go by really fast and you don't think about it, but on a bad script level, and on the movie just trying to be like seem like more badass than it is. There's a moment before they take Uwais into their convoy to try and get him to the plane, where Mark Wahlberg says, like, "Well, I guess write up my resignation papers," and you don't really know what he means, but it's revealed that before they go on this mission, the entire team signs resignation papers so that they are no longer officially U.S. government agents, so that if they get caught or their bodies are recovered after getting killed, the U.S. government has complete like deniability about them as a team, right? But then all I could think of is like, well, wait, but we've seen them already at the beginning of the movie go on a different mission. We know they've been on multiple missions. We know they are a regular team. Do they have to do this every time? And then what, do they have to put their resume back up on LinkedIn afterwards and get rehired? Wouldn't it be easier for them to just never be official government agents? Why are they ever government agents? Why do they have to like resign just before this mission? It's just one of those things where like the movie doesn't want you to think about that. The movie just wants you to think how cool it is when they like resign and how like, oh shit, they're no longer working for the US government. But it's like, well, yeah, but what about Tuesday? Were they government agents then? You know, so again, just that kind of dumb shit.
Yeah, like that dumb, I said before, that dumb DTV stuff. You know, like this is a better made Seagal movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's kind of those programmers that you like to talk about. You know, it's the Gerard Butler makes a lot of them recently. You know, it feels like that, but with $50 million behind it and like huge star. Okay, the reveal. Okay, spoilers. I kind of recommend to like check it out. Like, I don't know, like there's some good action scenes, you know, and it's 85 minutes of your life.
If you have 80 minutes and you're going to come to it just for the action, it might be worth a watch. You know, if you're a fan of Iko Uwais already, like this is probably, I'd say maybe his best action showcase in American movies so far. So, you know, might be worth it for that.
Yeah. So the reveal, well, first of all, you know what? Let me just bring something up first. We didn't really talk about it in the preamble, but this is around the time where, again, Mark Wahlberg's persona is well known. It's being made fun of. Now, Trev, SNL, Andy Samberg. Let me play the clip.
And now Mark Wahlberg talks to animals.
Hey, I'm Mark Wahlberg. You guys know me. Let's go talk to some animals. Hey, dog, how's it going? I like your fur. That looks really great. So you're a dog, right? What's that all about? Okay, well, it was great to meet you. Say hi to your mother for me, okay? Now I'm gonna talk to a donkey.
Okay, so that has entered pop culture now.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, it's a big joke of who Mark Wahlberg is, how he sounds, and you know, yada yada. Anyway, this movie's happening. They get Iko to the plane. Mission accomplished. Lauren Cohan goes onto the plane as well because she's going to go back to the States now. James Silva is going to go back to the embassy and, you know, gonna have a coffee or whatever. I don't know. He's gonna
yell at people.
He's gonna scream at the, you know. And then Lee Noor looks at Mark Wahlberg and says this.
Oh, hey. Say hello with your mother for me.
What? Say hello to who? What the fuck did you say?
Okay.
Chris, I couldn't believe it. My jaw almost literally dropped.
I rewound. I had to watch it twice. I was like, okay, are they self-aware? Like, oh my God, they're putting this in this movie?
It was insane. I was like, because like I said, the movie has like the slightest bits of attempted humor before, but I just couldn't believe they did that meta joke in this movie.
Dude, this was like the I'm the Juggernaut bitch.
Yeah.
Like the modern era. They took a meme, they put it into film, and here we are. So that was hilarious. Now that leads to the reveal that Lenore is not a double agent. He's a triple agent.
Yes. And
it's revealed that early in the film, the first preamble mission that we see, which is a bit of a heist and has a safe cracking, by the way. So
sure.
I was reminiscent of the Italian Job. But they have a prologue mission where they kill a young Russian teen that was, part of the baddies, right? Well, it's revealed that young dude was his mom is somewhere high up in Russia and basically manipulated everything that we've seen. It's kind of like remember when we talked about the heists, how they have plan A, plan B, and then there's an actual plan C, which was plan B and A all the time?
Yeah.
Okay. That's basically what's happening, that she has manipulated everybody here to then get an Uno reverse, that Lenore is now on a plane going somewhere, we don't know where, and then the Russians infiltrate our Overwatch crew, kill everyone.
Yeah, because when he gives them the codes, when they access the codes, it actually reveals their location to the Russians.
Yes. So the Russians show up, kill everybody, including John Malkovich, and Lauren Cohan's on a plane with the bad guy, and Mark Wahlberg is left to pick up the pieces, and then credits, because now the next movie would be like a revenge rescue mission, I would assume. I will say, a pretty good reveal. It could be way better, but it was a pretty good reveal. And there was a piece of me that was like, okay, I've seen Uwais as a bad guy before.
Yeah.
I would like to see this cat and mouse game again. Hey, what do you think?
Well, I only say to you again, and this is what I was alluding to earlier. Imagine how much more effective this reveal would be if we ever believed throughout the course of the movie that these two guys liked each other.
Totally.
And that they had started to become friends. Because what is always more compelling in these kind of stories is if the continuation now is the story of two men who started to respect each other, two men who actually did like each other, now forced to, just because they work for different governments, to have to like combat each other and go against each other. That's much more exciting than, the second movie is going to be Mark Wahlberg going after a guy he never gave a shit about in the first place. So it's like, that's just like whatever, right? Like,
and barely cares about Alice too.
Yeah. So if these two guys had become friends, I would be kind of like, I would be way more on board for like wanting to see a sequel, because that's like compelling. Like, oh my God, like that's the stuff of like John Woo, right? These two men who love each other, but are now forced to like fight and try to kill each other. And this is just like, no, it's just this guy who hates everybody already hated this guy. Now he hates him even more.
I'm half into it. And I'm also wary of what the hell do they name the sequel?
Mile 23, I guess, right?
Well, the thing is, it's mile 22 because it's literally 22 miles to get out to the airport.
I know.
Like, they call it 2,000 miles. Like, I have no idea. It's pretty. Yeah. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner with that.
Well, guess what? Not a problem they or us will ever have to think about.
But yeah, like, I mean, overall, like, it's like a totally serviceable bullets and blood action set piece. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to think about it after I put this thing together. So that kind of answers the, does it deserve sequels? No, it really doesn't. As much as like there's a little soupçon of me wants to see the cat and mouse, it wouldn't be worth another $50 million to do that, you know?
It's the kind of thing where as you watch it, there's certain elements of it, as I said, that like your brain turns off and you go, I'm kind of into the action.
Yeah,
but in the year of our Lord 2018, and especially in the year of our Lord 2025, we just have so many better kinds of these movies and better action movies with some of them with even these same people in them. So like this movie is missing one or two things to make it special, to pull it over the line, to make it something you'll remember and worth revisiting. This is just a total like, yeah, it existed for 85 minutes. I enjoyed some of it, but as you said, I'll never think of it again. So that's the problem, is it's just missing that little extra special sauce. And like I said, for a subgenre I really like, I think it just missed those two key elements that would have like made it as effective as some of those better ones I mentioned.
Yeah. Now, how painful would the original Ronda Rousey movie have been?
Oh God. I mean, I can't even. It
Torturous.
is like that.
Torturous.
I did know going in that it was originally developed as a movie about her, and that made it even extra funny that she's the first team member to die. Like this movie wastes no time getting rid of her, and to think that she was the intended star, and then she's gone in like the first half hour was very, very funny.
Yeah, I agree. Full blown panic on that one.
Yeah.
This was fun. I like this one. This is we're coming in under 85 minutes, which is good.
Just like the movie, yeah.
Yeah. The next bit of Mark Wahlturd and the Yucky Bunch, we're looking at quite a recent one, actually. Spencer Confidential of 2020, released right in the middle of pandemic, I think.
Yeah, let me just look up something. Let's see who the director is on that. Oh, Peter Berg.
Is Peter Berg gonna take the crown for F2F alum director? It must be, right?
I believe he will, actually. Looking over his filmography, first of all, it should be said, since 2013, he's made nothing but Mark Wahlberg movies. I am at this point curious if he will ever make a non-Mark Wahlberg movie. It also makes me, I do know that at one point, Peter Berg was really trying to develop Dune before Denis Villeneuve ended up doing it. Wow. I wonder who Mark Wahlberg would have played. You have to assume Duke Leto, which would have been something.
Yep.
Or maybe Duncan Idaho. Who knows? Or
all the characters.
We have already, as you said, we have already covered Hancock and Battleship. We've now covered Mile 22, and I can tell you right now, with Spencer Confidential, after that, there's still one more on our list from him that I think will put him at 5. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, the Peter Berg show.
Take that, Noyce.
I'm a little sad that we will dethrone Noyce one day.
I know.
A little sad. Okay.
Hey, Noyce still has time. He's still kicking too, you know?
He still has time to fail. That's the show. Okay. Follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be sweet. And then just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And follow along as we go for the final installment of Mark WahlTURD and the Yucky Bunch.
So we are continuing with the third installment of, why do I always forget the name of this? Mark Wahlturd. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
It's always that first part I forget.
Yeah.